Good morning. Thanks for being with us on News Center Maine's Political Brew. We're joined this morning by former state senator and mayor of Portland Ethan Strimling and former state senator and Yarmouth town councilor Phil Harriman. Gentlemen, good to see you as always.
Good to see you, Pat.
Good to see you.
Good morning, Ethan.
Plenty going on, and every week it seems we're ramping up the talk about lobster politics. And here we go again. Threats to the lobster industry inspired a rally on Wednesday. Many speakers called upon Attorney General Aaron Frey to file a lawsuit against NOAA, the regulators, on the state's behalf. But the Attorney General's office says it has intervened in several lawsuits involving lobster regulations over the last year. And a spokesperson for the Attorney General says the state is using the same defenses it would if they filed a separate lawsuit, and they believe taking further legal action with the same arguments wouldn't help. But Ethan, should there be a state of Maine versus United States as a symbolic gesture just to show the weight of the state is behind them?
I think the word you used is appropriate. It would be symbolic. It would be somewhat performative. I think the Attorney General is probably right. The arguments are being made. They're being made in the right courts. The fight to try to make sure that we find the right balance is there. And so I think it would be somewhat performative if he were to do it. You know, I think the one thing we have to realize in this, we talk about the politics of this, and I think there is a lot of empathy for lobsterers. There's no question about that. But Maine is also very pro-environment, very pro-animal welfare, et cetera. And I think that's the place where I think lobsterers have got to make sure that they're not alienating that crowd, because there's a lot of environmentalists out there who are on the other side of that issue, who feel very strongly about protecting the whales. They've got to make sure they got a little bit more balance, a little more compassion, I think.
Do we need this higher profile state lawsuit?
I don't think so. I agree with Ethan. This would be more symbolic than action-oriented. But it does illustrate, Pat, the power of regulators who are unelected, not appointed, who are making up these rules that have this significant impact on our lobster fisheries. And maybe it's going to require legislative action, and I think Ethan would agree with me when we were in the Senate, in different centuries, by the way. You'd often have to put in legislation to bring regulators back to the original intent of what the law was meant to do.
Politically speaking, there's been a lot of hostility toward Governor Janet Mills from lobstermen at a couple of these public events. Is this starting to stick to her?
I'm sure it is, because the lobstermen and women are afraid of their livelihood, and they want someone in a position of power to act. And so it's directed at Governor Mills, but also, our congressional delegation has the ability to introduce legislation if they want.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's much more of a federal issue than it is a state issue, for sure. And obviously Janet Mills has really stepped into the fray of trying to make sure that the federal government does what it needs to do to find this right balance. But as I said before, she's trying to make sure that she balances both the interests of the lobsterers and the interests of environmentalists. But I think that she's done a very good job of trying to, fight for the rights of Maine to be able to do it in a balanced way.
Now, at that same lobster rally on Wednesday, 1st District Republican congressional candidate Ed Thielander likened federal regulators targeting lobster fishermen to rapists.
NOAA wants to rape you and your family.
In a debate with Congresswoman Shelley Pingree that same night, Thielander apologized and said his passion had gotten the best of him when he made those remarks.
My comments were over the top, and I apologize for that. I'm very passionate about it.
But then in the Portland Press-Herald, he walked back some earlier remarks, sharing fringe conspiracy theories, admitting he had seen no proof. Phil, what does this tell you about Ed Thielander's campaign?
Inexperience, to be sure. Your words matter. If you want to sit in the seat of the U.S. Congress in the United States, your words matter. And so I think he's learned a very valuable lesson. If you don't know it to be a fact, don't say it. And on the other side, I would also compliment him for acknowledging he went too far, he was over the top, and he apologized to voters.
It's not common in politics, I guess, to get an actual apology.
Right. Yeah, certainly not in Maine, certainly not from your side of the aisle often, unfortunately. Governor LePage has said a lot of things that he should have walked back, and he didn't. Phil and I actually confronted him once a long time ago about some anti-Semitic remarks, and he finally did walk those back. But I think Phil's right. This is a lot of inexperience on his part. He's commended for, apologizing for it. But I think the bigger reflection is that this is a reflection of today's Republican Party. This is the base of the party, that people believe this. If you just come out of the ranks of the party, these are the kinds of things that you're hearing and seeing and not verifying. And that, I think, is what's most unfortunate as a reflection.
This week, Republican lawmakers said that Governor Mills and the Maine Public Utilities Commission plan to give discounts on electric rates for owners of electric vehicles and heat pumps. They say that's the other ratepayers not getting the discount will be forced to make up the difference. And the Republicans claim the new policy takes money from the poor and gives it to the rich, while the Democrats say it's a solution to reduce costs for everyone through green energy. I guess the question is, Ethan, is it good policy or not?
Well, it's always good to incentivize green energy, and it's not really going to take from the poor and give to the rich. That's absolutely incorrect. You know, if it comes from state money, that's through our income tax, and that's progressive, thankfully. But we should be trying to make sure that how we get relief to low and middle income families as well. I think that's part of why Janet Mills supported the $850 tax rebate that went out there. Other things are trying to do through Efficiency Maine. You know, we need to come at this from every possible angle. This is one angle. It shouldn't be the only one. I hope they do more.
I see it very differently. It is basically subsidizing people who are wealthy enough to afford an electric vehicle at the expense of people who may be driving inefficient cars. So it is a shift to some ratepayers at the expense of others, and that's not good public policy in my view.
The January 6th committee voted unanimously to subpoena former President Trump for testimony and to provide documents for their investigation of the January 6th Capitol riot. Phil, what is your take on the impact this has had? That was the last public hearing they're supposed to have. We've seen an awful lot come out over the last 6 or 8 months.
We have, and we've also seen a lot of people take the Fifth Amendment, and this is an opportunity for the president. I hope he accepts this opportunity to testify and set the record straight according to his facts and figures.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear Phil say that. You know, this is really the opportunity. One of the issues that I know Phil has had an issue with other Republicans is that their side of the case has not been presented as much as they would like their side of the case. This is Donald Trump's opportunity to actually present that side. It would be remarkable theater for guys like us who could watch it and comment on it. But, you know, obviously it's a dark day in American history. There's only 4 presidents that have ever been subpoenaed in this way. One of them had to resign. One of them voluntarily did it. I hope that in the end, Donald Trump does this. The evidence against him is pretty overwhelming. And if he wants to try to make his case, he should do it.
Senator Susan Collins is in line to become the top Republican on the Defense Appropriations Committee. Ethan, is that a good thing for Maine?
Well, if she's going to be the chair, that would mean that Republicans are in charge, and that
she could be ranking member.
She could be ranking. If she's ranking member, that's awesome. That's great. But if she becomes chair, that is most definitely not good for Maine, because that means that Republicans have taken over control of the U.S. Senate.
But in terms, Phil, of we have large defense-related industries here. Probably not a bad thing.
Oh, I don't know of a downside to it to have someone with that experience and that seniority sitting on probably one of the largest budget items in the federal government.
The Portland voters have 13 ballot questions to decide in November, including some significant charter change proposals. More than $500,000 has been spent already to defeat these questions, including getting major contributions from national companies such as Uber and DoorDash. Is this just something that goes with the territory, or is reform needed, or, Phil, even possible?
It's going to be almost impossible to reform it because the opportunity to use your dollars to create speech has been affirmed by the Supreme Court. And it just tells you the depth and concern that the opponents have for these ballot initiatives to attract that kind of money far and wide across the country is very telling.
And of course, Ethan, you're close to the ground on this. You're passionate and involved in a lot of these causes. What do you make of it?
Yeah, it's an example of how money's gotten out of control in politics. And, the irony of it, of course, is that one of the charter changes is actually going to enhance a clean elections program so that at least candidates who are running will not be as susceptible to this kind of outside money. And it has a provision to actually say that corporations can't give to candidates as well. So it's trying to do a little bit, but Phil's right. Until we really overturn the Supreme Court decision, in which they claimed that money is speech, it's going to be very difficult to move forward. The other big step I would take is more transparency. This stuff ought to be reported almost as soon as it comes in. Some of these donations were made months ago, and we're only finding out about it now.
On Wednesday, we'll be hosting a new Center Maine Voice of the Voter Forum with the candidates for Congress in the 1st District. That's Shelley Pingree and Ed Thielander. Ethan, how do you see this race shaping up as of today?
It's Shelley's race to lose, which I don't think she will. I think she'll be very strong. You know, this debate, I would encourage Ed to call Phil and to have Phil say to him those simple words, do no harm to yourself, because that seems to be what he does every time he opens his mouth.
Yeah, I think Ethan's got it assessed just right. This also could be an opportunity for Ed, if he truly has a passion for public service, to build off of this experience and use it at another time.
Well, let's wrap up as we always do with our winners and losers in politics. And Phil, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Pat. My loser this week is the jury in the Parkland shooting incident. The families of those victims are heartbroken that they didn't feel justice was served. My winner this week is a local varsity coach, Dave Halligan from Falmouth, first coach in Maine history to have 500 wins as a varsity soccer and basketball coach.
Impressive. And Ethan?
Well, since he went with a little hometown, then I got to go with a little hometown on the winner of the week. That's Matthew Bernstein, who's the Teacher of the Year at Casco Bay High School. An incredible honor to have somebody right here in Portland. He's a great teacher, but doing great work out there. My loser of the week, Ed Thielander. He's just really exposed himself, put his foot in his mouth too many times, and he's good for him for walking it back, but it's a real problem.
Ethan Strimling, Phil Harriman, as always, thank you. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you next time. News Center Maine is back after this.